And for those of us who teach, it also helps to solidify that what we teach you in class sometimes is what prevails in professional practice. So it's always a good thing to come and listen to experts, and this is something we want to keep doing for a long time. And today we are most honored and privileged to welcome John, who has a very impressive professional background. I'm sure you all have read about him on LinkedIn already, as usually is the case. But he comes from Morgan Stanley and is highly experienced. So we hope that you will appreciate his experiences that he will share with you today, and see more importantly how that relates to not only what you study now, but also in your future career directions. So without much further ado, what I want to say a few words.
Sure. So thank you all very much for coming, and it's really a delight to be able to welcome my friend John to talk to you, because John is not only an experienced person at the very highest levels of finance, running his own group at Morgan Stanley, which of course is a leading institution here in the United States for wealth management and investment banking. But in addition, he's a best-selling novelist, so it's rare to find people who combine those two different types of skills. And even better of all, for this current audience, many of the things he's written about are financial advice for young adults. So it's really a great pleasure to be able to have him here to speak with you. I wanted also to help him understand a little bit about you. Naturally, I told him about you guys and all of your wonderful talents and abilities. But I think it's helpful if you could just say where you're from, each one of you, because looking at you, you look pretty much like, most young people. And yet, you come from all around the world. So that's very unusual, and it's a difference about this group compared to other groups that you might find in Boston. So maybe we start in the back. Just say, your hometown, wherever it's from, and we'll just go down and let John hear from you. You just say Manila or?
Subic Bay.
Subic Bay, okay.
I'm from the Lower Pakistan, Agra, Miami.
That's okay, Miami's fine. I'm from Cambridge. I'm from Cambridge, so it doesn't have to be a faraway place.
Sing it out, boys and girls.
Sorry, I think you couldn't hear. Start up.
I'm from
Dominican Republic.
I'm from Guatemala.
Guatemala. Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic. Honduras. Honduras. Spain? Yeah.
Spain.
Slovakia?
Haiti.
Haiti.
Freetown. Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone?
Brazil.
That's a big place.
Sao Paulo.
Sao Paulo.
Brazil.
Brasilia. Where are we else here?
Brazil.
Sao Paulo?
Russia.
Which city? Okay, I'll let you say it.
France, Paris. Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Sao Paulo?
Depends on the law. Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Texas is big too.
Houston.
Houston. Which city in Virginia? Okay, guys, yeah, Pablo.
Yeah, India.
India.
Oslo, Norway.
Montreal, Canada.
Massachusetts, Brazil.
There you go.
Wow. Well, Bob had said, Professor Bob had said, well, you look like just, normal people. No, I think much better looking than normal people. So it's a privilege to be here. Happy to be with you, and happy to be at the school, which I wasn't really familiar with, and now it's really got the wow factor. It's like it sprung fully armed from the forehead of Zeus, as Bob Neer would say, and he'll explain that to you all later. But I'm going to jump around in my remarks to you today, and jumping around, it's like real life. Meaning we're all over the place in our thoughts, and sometimes it's difficult to focus. But my remarks are going to be kind of common sense related, And a lot having to do with, as you get out into life, how are you going to brand yourselves? So America's a country of 320 million people and 7 billion on the planet. How do you guys separate yourselves from the crowd and make sure that you're a little different and that you can make your mark? And I know that a lot of you grew up in comfortable circumstances. And one thing that I hope you all have, and to a certain extent, you wouldn't be here unless you had it. But if you came from comfortable circumstances, and you come from distinguished families in the countries where you come from, and I hope you've got the fire in your bellies to do better than anybody in the history of your family in the past. Because what I have to say to you, again, a lot will be how you brand yourselves and how you present yourselves as being a little different than everybody else. So, in the last, I've been writing books for years and years, and written for maybe 50 magazines, everything from the Atlantic Monthly, if you know that one, to Playboy when they were in their glory days. And I write a column for a publication in Boston called The Improper Bostonian, and it's an advice column. And it's typically directed to, the magazine is typically directed to your generation. And it's called The Dance, the column is, meaning the dance of life. And you guys are now in the dance of life. And we're gonna, as I say, skip around. But I was invited about 8 years ago to give a talk. There's an international school of business at Brandeis University in Waltham. And I was asked to come there 8 years ago and talk about street smart solutions to the problems that you guys will all find once you get out into life after school. And when I was finished, a young lady who grew up in Paris, came to the school from Paris, said, "No one ever told us that." And the phrase kind of stuck in my mind. Where do books come from? Where do the ideas for books come from? They come from a germ of an idea. And sometimes the idea sticks in your brain for a long time. And then finally it may turn into paper or on the screen and turn into a book. So that phrase, "no one ever told us that," kind of stuck in my mind. And after a while, it turned into a book that came out 8 years ago called "No One Ever Told Us That." Lessons on Life and Money, and originally to my young grandchildren, sorry. And it was a Boston Globe bestseller, and it was a bestseller around the country. And the second edition is for your generation, also called "No One Ever Told Us That." Money and Life Lessons for Young Adults, which is basically you guys. And it's not just about money, it's about life. We'll give you a few examples. Wherever you go, if you go into family businesses and you interview and you write resumes for yourselves, most resumes, I see dozens, if not hundreds of resumes from young people all over the country every year. And no matter how much of a digital world we're in, people seem to be desperate for the human touch. In other words, personal. And in one of these books, I talked about the value of personal notes, because no one writes personal notes anymore. And I find that if you write a personal note and you send it to thank somebody for something special that they've done for you, people say, "Oh boy, it's a personal note." People tend to save them. And one business idea that comes from this, years ago when I was a rookie in the investment business, one way that I tried to get, it was long before the computer came into use and long before the digital age, and you basically depended upon your shoe leather to get new clients. And I would go into an office building in downtown Boston. I'd start at the top floor, and in buildings that had lawyers' offices. And I would go into every single lawyer's office, give them my business card, and try and get business from the lawyers. And one small law firm, I banged on the door about half a dozen times, and finally the chief partner let me in to talk to him. And he couldn't be bothered with me, but I was persistent. And at one point, I was so persistent that he gave me an order to buy some stock. And in those days, you bought stock, and the client paid a commission. That's how you got paid. And one day, when I was in his office, a woman was in the office, and it turned out to be the lawyer's wife. And I kind of made friends with her in the reception area. And she was funny, and she was smart. And a few months later, like 4 or 5 months, I saw in the paper, when everybody read newspapers, that she had died. So she must have had just rapid onset cancer. She died of it. And I wrote the lawyer a note of condolence to tell him I was sorry and that we had had such a nice chat. He called me in about a week later to his office, and he gave me all of his business because of that note. Not only that, but he introduced me to all of young lawyers in his office. Almost all of them became clients. This was probably 35 years ago. 2 weeks ago, one of those lawyers, now not so young, called to send an estate to me and a family that had $20 million and opened up accounts with me to handle the money of the children. Because of a condolence note 35 years ago, I'm still getting business out of that. So it's one way to brand yourself, because nobody writes personal notes anymore. And it's a trick of the trade. And if you go to work in London, or I don't care where you go, people appreciate the personal touch. The more personal you can make things, the more successful you can become. And if you keep that personal touch, no matter how rich or famous you may get. I have much more than $1 billion business that I run for clients all over the world. And my books have been translated into languages in most of the countries that you came from. Translated into Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Arabic, in Saudi Arabia, Spain, Portugal, all over the place. And what's fun is to visit the cities where I've had translations and meet new friends and keep expanding your universe. Which leads me to the whole idea of resumes. And how do you separate yourself from the crowd? So another thing is, it may sound odd, even 20 years ago, everybody who went into business in any city, probably in the world, wore a suit and a tie. And virtually doesn't exist anymore. So in a funny kind of way, wearing a suit and a bow tie, it's like a brand in itself. Why? Because nobody does it. And particularly bow ties. And people seem to be interested in bow ties. All the security people, I work in a high-rise building in downtown Boston. And some of you may see it someday, because I have a lot of young people who want further guidance and tend to find their way into the office. And in many ways, it's, and Bob can attest to this, in a certain way, it may be the best office in the city, because it looks like the office of an English professor. And there are books and posters and memorabilia all over the place. So, here's the resume thing. You're all, no matter where you go, you're going to have to present resumes to people. Most resumes are completely plain vanilla, and they're boring. A lot of it has to do with how well you did academically. Most employers don't care how you did academically. And here's what it takes to have a resume that resonates. I interviewed the biggest headhunter in Boston a couple of years ago to talk about, and he was the biggest headhunter in financial services in the city, mostly for CEOs. And he said, if a busy person reads your resume, they will take 16 seconds to look at it. That's it, 16 seconds. So you better have something that pops out at the audience that, and sometimes, not sometimes, most of the time, what pops out is something you never would have considered, like your hobbies, for instance, or your outside interests. A couple of, for instance, 10 years ago, clients of mine had a daughter who was married and lived in Tokyo. And her husband was not Japanese, but he took Japanese in school. And he was working for a bank in Tokyo. And the in-laws desperately wanted their daughter back in the States. But the young man couldn't get a job anywhere in the States because his expertise was in speaking Japanese. And people wouldn't hire him because they said, well, why would you not want to stay in Japan? Couldn't get a job. So I said, have the young man send me his resume. It was so boring that I just balled it up and threw it in the basket. And nothing of interest. So the parents of the girl wanted me to speak to him. So I spoke to him in Tokyo. And I said, haven't you ever done anything in your life? He said, well, what do you mean? Haven't I done anything in my life? I said, well, there's no interest. It's all about academia and your job. And it's boring. So you're not going to get anybody's attention. Tell me about yourself. So it took a long time for him to open up. And he said to me, well, about interest, he says, I'm a black belt in karate. And it was a certain kind of obscure martial art they had a black belt in. So instantly I know if he had the toughness and the resilience and the intensity to get to be a black belt, then probably he's going to be a good worker. So I said, put karate black belt on your resume. He said, it's irrelevant. I said, no, it isn't. So he sent the resume to banks in New York. And he got 2 job offers. And both of the interviewers, which was on the phone then, talked first about black belt karate. The black belt in karate that jumped out at the interviewers got him the job. Now there are certain clubs in life. So what do I mean by a club? Rugby is a club. Rowing is a club. If you grow up in the Midwest, wrestling is a club. Women's ice hockey, women's water polo, or collecting butterflies. And very often, what's going to get you hired is stuff that you never think of. For instance, if you played lacrosse in college, don't just say play lacrosse. If you actually play this position, say, I played attack in lacrosse. Why do you put an adjective in? Because people can get an image of somebody who's attacking. If you guys are attacking anything, it's going to get people's attention. So that's one story about karate. A young lady about 20 years ago came to me out of school and she said, my parents sent me to you and I want to be in advertising, but I don't know anybody in advertising. I said, tell me about yourself. One of the things she said was, I kicked the door down to get business. So, wow, a young lady saying, I kicked the door in to get somebody's business. I said, why don't you go out, again, think unconventionally. It'll get you in many doors, and it'll get you jobs. I said, go out and buy a rubber stamp pad, and a red rubber stamp, and have the stamp say, I can sell anything. And she said, well, that sounds hokey to me. I said, just do it. And she did, and she got 4 job offers. And she came to me after a speech years later and said, I'm still in advertising, and the stamp got me the job. People didn't read the rest of the resume, and they hired me, and I can sell anything. Third one that happened a year ago, a young lady from Kosovo came into my office. And by the way, I don't do this for a living, so this is what I call freebies. And I actually have to work, so there's a limit. For instance, in jumping around, and I'll get back to the Kosovo lady, but if you're all hot to go, and say you all stay in the States and you're applying for jobs, and Sunday night you get your ducks in a row, and you're going to hit the phones or the computer tomorrow morning and put things out, never approach anybody who's busy on a Monday morning looking for a job or informational meeting. Never on Monday. Why? Because busy people are going to be preparing for the week and getting their work week in order. The last person they want to hear from is you. And if you pop up on a Monday morning, you're just going to piss them off. And immediately give them they'll say, that kid's clueless. Nobody should bother anybody who's busy on Monday morning. Starting after lunch on Tuesday is a time it's okay to pop up and ask, because by then people have their work. So never on Monday. And